The 20th century had barely begun, and it was soon engulfed in conflict. It began with what has been recognized as the first general international engagement. Historians have identified a number of reasons for the outbreak of World War in 1914. To begin with, there was the division of Europe into two hostile camps by means of alliances. These had their roots in nationalism, which had in turn been fostered by the democratic spirit working amongst peoples separated by the old language barriers. Otto von Bismarck, the German Chancellor, had used every means at his disposal including war, intimidation, and cajolery to weld together the collection of German states, and had made an extremely strong German army in the process. He had then set about preserving the humanistic peace by concluding a series of agreements with Russia, Austria, Hungary, and Italy to deter France from endeavoring to reclaim the disputed territory of Alsace-Lorraine. France had in turn forged an alliance with Russia after the one they had with Germany was abandoned, which England eventually joined. Germany's armaments provoked an arms race, which included the naval arena where German Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm II determined to equal Britain, who ruled the waves with their naval power. Imperialism went hand in hand with nationalism. At the beginning of the 20th century, Britain already had a vast and wealthy empire, which she was determined to retain. Her position in occupation of Egypt and control of the Suez Canal was crucial to protecting her interests in the Far East. The Dutch were also well represented outside of Europe, and the French to a lesser extent. Germany, however, was a latecomer in acquiring overseas colonies, but her determination to become a world power was at least as strong as that of Britain to stay that way. The inculcation of friendship with Turkey by Wilhelm II was a logical move that gave Germany a Middle East influence, thereby arousing the jealousies of Britain and Russia. Germany made no secret of the fact that her military might was intended to improve her imperial standing and maintain her industrial leadership on the continent. In 1913, the German Crown Prince wrote, "It is only by relying on our good German sword that we can hope to conquer that place in the sun which rightly belongs to us, and which no one will yield to us voluntarily." Here we see the mode of imperial Rome of past ages still very much alive. The growing potential for war gave cause for concern to many people, and efforts to establish peace and world unity were evident. The International Court in Hague was set up early in the century, and arbitration was more frequently resorted to for the settlement of international disputes. There was a selfish interest on the part of all the rich countries to enjoy the benefits of the improved economic circumstances that had sprung, not only from the application of science, but, to a considerable degree, from colonial exploitation as well. Culture, education, and entertainment were being pursued by all. One historian has observed, "Never since the fall of the Roman Empire had public authority been so careful to provide for the common amusements of the people." The obstacle of language was serious. Otherwise there was reason to hope that, given a century of peace, Europe might be made one through the forces of culture and education. The message of these circumstances is familiar. A Tower of Babel society, dedicated to its own licentious pursuits, although still restrained from full development by the language barriers. But the divine axiom, "There is no peace, saith my God, to the wicked," this could not be circumvented, as events soon proved. In contrast with the professed aspirations for peace, there was a thirst for war. At the beginning of the 20th century, Germany and Britain were the most powerful nations in Europe. Every able German male had been, was, or would be drilled in the art of war, impressed with the honor of fighting for the so-called fatherland. Hatred of Britain was fostered, and an opportunity for war was relished. This was not only the case in Germany, since the same type of thinking had pervaded all Europe. James Joule points out that the Darwinian evolutionary concepts of improvement through struggle and the survival of the fittest had been applied to the field of international relations, with the disastrous conclusion that violent conflict was seen as a blessing. He cites French novelist Émile Zola, who in 1891 wrote, "Would not the end of war be the end of humanity? War is life itself. Nothing exists in nature, is born, grows or multiplies, except by combat. We must eat and be eaten so that the world may live. It is only warlike nations which have prospered. A nation dies as soon as it disarms. War is the school of discipline, sacrifice, and courage. The ancient Romans, portrayed in their legends as descending from Mars, the god of war, would have wholeheartedly agreed. Today's generation, in the shadow of nuclear annihilation, terrorism and bioweaponry, should have cause to disagree. Yet war is still glorified, and modern youngsters are brought up on a diet of violence, heavily spiced with war games. The grotesquely evil fallout from Darwinism did not affect relations only between nation and nation, but, as might be expected, between nations and the Jews. This people within nations were regarded as diluting the purity of the national stock, notwithstanding the high standard of the contribution made by Jews in many avenues of society. The intrinsic anti-Semitism of all classes of the population, finding convenient justification in social Darwinism, blinded society to some obvious facts. The catalyst that eventually precipitated the unstable situation in Europe into all-out war was the assassination of the Austrian heir apparent, Archduke Francis Ferdinand, and his wife in Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, on the 28th of June, 1914. The assassination was carried out by agents from neighboring Serbia, who wished to stir up insurrection in the Bosnian province of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, with whose Slavic subjects they had strong ties. The brittle iron clay consistency of the feet of the image in Daniel chapter 2 was still very evident in Europe. The Austro-Hungarians soon found excuse to declare war on Germany to the north. Russia then mobilized to honor its obligations to the Serbs and, if possible, seize the coveted prize of Constantinople in the process. England and Germany immediately approached Tsar Nicholas II to prevent the war from spreading, but it was too late. The Russians entered Prussia, France supported Russia, and so Germany declared war on both. The violation of Belgian neutrality by Germany brought England into the war also. Turkey sided with the Central Powers and Japan with the Allies. Italy, belatedly, also joined the Allies. Though no government wanted a world war, the social, political, and economic factors operating in their populations had brought it about. The voices of peoples glutted with propaganda suited to their tastes could not be resisted. Democracy had not cured the fundamental problems of the world. But from the grisly conflict, God's providence was to develop a new and essential factor that would play a major part in the time of the end, a homeland for the Jews. Forced to fight simultaneously on two fronts, Germany could not exploit her initial successes in Russia and France to obtain an early end to hostilities, as the war became literally bogged down. Britain, in breach of international convention, blockaded the Central Powers with a large fleet, hoping to starve them into submission. Germany's response was the highly successful employment of submarine warfare against all forms of allied shipping, including, to her ultimate downfall, ships from the United States. President Woodrow Wilson on 6 April 1917 reluctantly entered the European War that he had tried to keep out of, with public opinion again a major influence. The voice of the people was also, meanwhile, creating a political earthquake in Russia. A poorly equipped army was rife with discontent, and the populations in the cities were short of food. An inept and corrupt Tsarist administration lost control and was forced to permit the return of political exiles. Germany enthusiastically railed in from Switzerland the Bolshevik leader, Lenin, who was known to favor an end to Russian involvement in the war. On 7th of November 1917, the ruling Romanov dynasty was overthrown and a Soviet republic proclaimed. At the head of the new government, Lenin declared an end to hostilities, negotiating the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with the Germans, signed in March 1918. Romania also pulled out of the war. Germany demanded and received a high price for peace. Russian Poland, Estonia and other territories went to the Central Powers. Certain territories to Turkey, Finland, the Ukraine and Georgia were to be granted independence, and finally, 6 billion marks for the German war chest. But there were two other events, in addition to the United States' entry and Russia's withdrawal from the war, for which 1917 would be noted, events paramount in the long history of mankind's struggles. They were the Balfour Declaration and the liberation of Palestine from the Turk. To most they were the mere accidents of war. To the Jews, they were the opening of a door of hope for eventual emancipation from millennia of homelessness and degradation. To Christ's brethren, they were a thrilling confirmation of the Bible and of the hand of God in world affairs in the 20th century. World War I, however, was by no means an unmixed blessing for the Jews, especially in Russia, where the greatest number, 5 million, were concentrated, and where the Russian Orthodox Church wielded its influence. 2/3 Jews were drafted into the army in Russia, 1/3 in Austro-Hungary, 100,000 in Germany and 50,000 each in France and Britain. During the war, the Jews in Russia were considered by the Tsarist regime as enemies, and expulsions, pogroms, and persecutions were perpetrated by the armed forces. When Poland fell to the Central Powers, the large number of Jews in the occupied area anticipated equal rights, but were disappointed. Jews in Palestine under Turkish rule were subject to evictions and other penalties. But the plight of Soviet Jews in particular gave increased impetus to Zionism. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to get notifications of new videos. Like, share and comment below.